Yo, massive news today. The Financial Accounting Standard Board votes in favor of fair value accounting for Bitcoin. What does this mean? We're going to get into it today. What is the current state of accounting for US public companies? Why is this such a big deal? What are the implications? This is a major win for Michael Saylor. This is something that he's been talking about for over a year. And I have Terrence Yang with me today, who's a managing director with Swan Private, to talk about all of this stuff. But first, let's pull up a tweet by Saylor himself. It seems like he just retweeted the breaking news article that was coming out of Bloomberg. So he says, fair value accounting is coming to Bitcoin. This upgrade to FASB accounting rules eliminates a major impediment to corporate adoption of Bitcoin as a treasury asset. This is something that he's talked about on Spaces. And according to this is one of the three things that he believes will take Bitcoin to potentially $5 million. That's not my words. That's something he said. So I'm going to play you guys a portion of the recording, and then Terrence and I will talk about it.
And you think the catalyst that 10x is, it really is the moment that JP Morgan Chase or other big money center banks can custody these for large corporates. That's it. That's the sea change, because there's really no reason why they shouldn't be diversifying the assets on their balance sheet. Is that your take? Because I know that, like, Tim Cook, I don't know where it came from earlier this week. He said something like, I own some Bitcoin, but we have no designs on anything. Or I don't know if he said Bitcoin or crypto in general. Is that the thing? And then
I think there's three big. Look, first of all, it's going up by a factor of 10, whether they fix any of the stuff, right? It's going to it's going to be a grind up by a factor of 10, just because gold is broken and Bitcoin's going to replace gold. And now everybody in the universe knows they need a non-sovereign store of value in the form of a bearer instrument. So now they're looking, the amount of stories for last year, people said inflation may be coming. We're not sure. Now the mainstream narrative is flipped to inflation is here. You need an inflation hedge. So it's going to grind up to replace gold. It'll go to $500,000 a coin, regardless of whether they fix these things. But there are three things that are massive catalysts that cause an acceleration. And I don't think that those three things don't take us to 500,000. They take us to 5 million a coin, right? Those three things are a spot ETF, where someone can go ahead and buy $100 million of Bitcoin via security, an ETF security. I think that's one. Two is your bank is going to custody it for you and lend against it. And three is I can mark it up or mark it down on my balance sheet based on fair value. Pari passu. It'll be pari passu to the way I'd handle Apple stock, or at least that good. If you have property with fair value accounting, by the way, it becomes pari passu to the way you'd handle treasury bonds on a treasury balance sheet. Treasuries are better than stocks because treasury is property, whereas a stock is a security, and you're capped out at 40% of your balance sheet as security. So
one of those three things just happened today, right? We know what's going on with the BlackRock ETF and the SEC, but one of the three things that Michael Saylor believes will take Bitcoin potentially to $5 million a coin happened today. But before we get into the news, let's dive into what this means. James Lavish came up with this incredible thread and he breaks it down. He makes it easy to understand. So let's check it out. The latest FASB ruling will be a pretty big deal for Bitcoin. But what's FASB and why should you care? Accounting is boring. FASB, blah. Normally, yes, but not this time. The latest FASB vote opens the door for companies to buy and hold Bitcoin in corporate treasuries without balance sheet penalties. Okay, how? First, the Financial Accounting Standards Boards, known as the FASB, is an independent organization that establishes accounting and financial reporting standards for US-based companies. These are known as the Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, or GAAP. As investors, why do we care? Because the SEC recognizes FASB as the official accounting rule maker for US public companies. If companies do not follow GAAP principles, they're out of compliance, and no respectable accounting firm will certify their financials as correct. So now that I said that, let's cover the breaking news article from Bitcoin Magazine. This came out today. In a long anticipated move, Bloomberg Tax reported that the Financial Accounting Standards Boards is set to introduce new fair value accounting rules for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. These new rules aim to provide a more accurate reflection of the market value of digital assets and bring greater transparency to the financial reporting of companies that hold cryptocurrencies. The rules expected to be published by the end of the year are set to go into effect as soon as 2025, but companies will be able to apply them earlier than that, the report said. For years, the valuation of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin has been a challenging aspect of financial reporting for companies. The volatile nature of these digital assets has made it difficult to accurately assess their fair market value. Under the current accounting standards, companies often struggle to present a true picture of their financial health, as the value of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies fluctuate wildly. The FASB's move to introduce fair value accounting rules will require companies to regularly assess their fair market value of their digital assets and report any fluctuations in value as part of the financial statements. This means that if the price of Bitcoin surges or plummets, companies will have to reflect these changes in their financial reports, providing stakeholders with a more accurate picture of their financial position. So, Terrence, what is going on? Why is this so significant? Why is this such a big deal? Because I know that a lot of people, myself included, we're not really familiar with a lot of this language. So what's your take?
Sure. So bottom line, this affects every U.S. public company, publicly traded company, and private companies that aspire to or plan to go public in the U.S. So this affects a huge swath of the market cap for all companies in the United States. And what this does is remove this major obstacle, as Michael Saylor would basically say, to you getting fair treatment of your Bitcoin. Why? Because we know Bitcoin is the best long-term asset. What we also know painfully from 2022 is Bitcoin is also volatile, going up like in 2021 and going down like in 2022. The problem is when it goes down, and let's say you bought Bitcoin at $56,000 in 2021, and now it drops to 16,000, which was the low price, let's say, for Bitcoin. You have $40,000 of loss per Bitcoin. You have to take that loss, even if Bitcoin goes from 16 to 28, even if Bitcoin goes from 16 to 200,000, which I think will happen within a couple years probably. But the bottom line is, even if Bitcoin goes back up, you still have $40,000 loss per Bitcoin. And on your balance sheet, right, people talk about Apple and other public companies having big balance sheets. Your balance sheet has just shrunk by $40,000 per Bitcoin, or when you go from 56 to 16, by almost 75% or so. And that's a big hit. Especially if you're like MSTR or a company like that has a lot of Bitcoin as a percentage of your assets.
And that must have been like a huge, like that's a disincentive for public companies to
Yes.
put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, because it just becomes an accounting nightmare.
Yeah, huge disincentive. And now that should go away by 2025. And there is something where if you do it right, if you have good accountants and you're probably communicating with FASB and so forth, you should be able to take advantage of that, even if you're starting to account for Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin in 2024, you should get the benefit of that treatment. So maybe if you're a private company and you're buying Bitcoin, you're continuing to buy Bitcoin, you plan to go public in 2025 or 2026, all the Bitcoin you have on your balance sheet, your treatment of that can be subject to this very beneficial fair value or mark-to-market accounting. So when Bitcoin does go up, right, because we know it's volatile, it rebounds every time. When it goes up from 16,000 to 28,000 or 200,000, you can mark it at that new price and show a very strong balance sheet that reflects reality.
And we were talking off air before, and you don't believe that this was malicious by the FASB. It was just the way it was.
Correct.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that? What's your take?
So number one, Bitcoin was quite small. Number two, they saw this virtual or digital currency and they didn't know what to do with it, and they just put it in currently existing rules. And the FASB, being conservative, were like, well, it's intangible. We're going to call it an intangible asset, because it's virtual. So it's going to be treated like goodwill. For goodwill, it makes sense to have a one-way downward ratchet. Why? Because once you lose your reputation, right? There's that saying, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and one act to lose it all. And that's what happens with companies, whether you're a Comcast with horrible service, customer service, or Enron or whatever. It's just very hard to come back. FTX is trying to come back with new management. The new CEO is very good, but because of the horrible brand it has, it's going to be really tough. So, for accounting purposes, intangible assets, the way they're treated with this one-way downward ratchet, where your reputation could go down and the value of your goodwill can go down, but it can never recover. That sort of makes sense. For Bitcoin, it didn't make sense. They just needed some time to realize that Bitcoin is not a scam. It's here to stay. It's getting bigger, and it's time to pay attention. And so, it takes this nonprofit, privately owned accounting board some time to get the rules right.
Do you agree with Saylor's statements where he said that, I love the way that he framed it, right? There was three catalysts: the spot Bitcoin ETF. We know what's going on with BlackRock, the bank custody, which I think is really interesting, and then the FASB. Do you really believe that it's a major catalyst, and this will be a huge incentive for public companies to potentially put Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
It is, but I'm going to be a little bit short-term bearish compared to some of my friends. It's all relative. I do think this is huge. Again, it doesn't take place until 2025, maybe 2026 for most companies. It's possible to get in earlier, but it won't be official. This is kind of a vote to approve, but it takes time to figure out the details and just kind of finally make it official going forward. And so that'll happen around 2025. So that's number one. Number two is it's going to take a little time for the spot Bitcoin ETFs to get approved in the US. Notwithstanding the grayscale ruling winning against the SEC, the problem is that the SEC has the option to delay. They can come up with other reasons. And they did file 37 sealed documents or so in their case against Binance on the same day that they lost to Grayscale. Coincidence? Probably not in that case, at least not in terms of the timing. And the reason for the 37 sealed docs could be because they're cooperating with the DOJ, which does often do sealed indictments or sealed documents when they indict Binance or whatever other related company that they might be considering indicting. So there could be some pain to come in the very short term, but medium to long term, meaning a couple years out, and then of course, long term forever, Laura. This is hugely bullish, especially when combined with what I think is the inevitable launch of BlackRock, Fidelity, and Invesco spot Bitcoin ETFs.
Bullish. So that's point number one. And then point number three was the FASB. What about point number two in terms of Saylor was talking about banks potentially offering custody of Bitcoin?
That will be huge as well. We've already seen Bank of New York Mellon, one of the world's biggest, if not biggest, trustee and custodian, custodying, I think, over $41 trillion of assets, or some ridiculously large number. They have been working with Fireblocks and others to custody digital assets. They're very conservative, so they're going slowly about it, but they kind of already announced it, and they've invested in Fireblocks. And we have other banks that are circling and interested in doing this. Custodian is one of the key things, because with spot Bitcoin, unlike futures Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin, it can be lost. The private keys can be lost. Futures Bitcoin or Bitcoin futures are cash settled, so you don't need to hold the Bitcoin and worry about custody as much. So yeah, banks doing that will be huge. They need to learn it, custody for themselves, and maybe some big institutions and high net worth individuals first before they offer it to retail. That's probably the steps I would take. But yeah, it should be coming, and that will be a good thing for the Bitcoin price. Not so good, I think you would agree, for self-sovereignty and freedom, because not your keys, not your coins, and you're relying on JP Morgan or whoever to hold your keys now.
Gotcha. Awesome. So a couple more questions, Terrence. And it seems like your webcam froze, but the good news is that your webcam froze with a giant smile on your face. So very, very good stuff.
Okay.
You're back. Awesome. So is this only good for public companies, or does this is this good for private companies as well?
Yeah, great question. It's good for all US public companies, but also private companies that are thinking about long term, they want to, they're doing well. They want to hire some pros and get their accounting in order and start reporting on a GAAP basis so that they're ready to transition from private to public. They can go public almost any time if they have GAAP accounting and some other kind of compliance, legal, regulatory, and finance people in place.
Gotcha. All right. So before we talk about Swan Private, what are the key takeaways of today's news? Like I said, for anyone, I think James Lavish put it perfectly, right? It's accounting. They're not familiar with it. Maybe they see it as boring. Obviously, for anyone who's a Bitcoiner, who's, plugged into Bitcoin Twitter, you're like, this is amazing. Anyone who's been paying attention to Michael Saylor. So if you could do a couple like bullet points, like what are the key takeaways of today's news?
Yeah. Number one, you as a Bitcoiner and as a potential investor or hodler of Bitcoin, you need to look at this. Why? Because the Bitcoin price has actually been down today 0.43% to 25,672 and change. That is incredible to me. The market has not digested this wonderful news, right? They're still, I think, reeling from whatever it is, Binance rumors and so forth. But again, if this is a great time, I think, to auto DCA, maybe increase your auto DCA. If you have $100,000 to put into Bitcoin, you might consider, this is not advice, but you might consider doing what a lot of our clients do and put half in now, 50,000, and do the other half over 10 weeks or 10 months or whatever. Why? So this way you minimize regret. No one can predict the price. I can't believe the price is actually off. Not a recommendation to buy, but I may need to buy some myself after seeing the price drop in spite of the wonderful news. And I think it's going to be great for the price medium to long term. It makes me much more confident in the price, even more than I was before. And I was already hugely bullish just on spot Bitcoin ETF news alone, right? And BlackRock, Invesco, Fidelity being interested in it, and the bank custodian news. But now that this news has broke, I'm super bullish medium term, I have to say, like a couple years out or more. And then lastly, I would say it's a good time to deepen your understanding of some of the financial stuff. Read James Lavish, ask us questions, whether it's James or myself or Corey or others. Some I'll try to answer, and I think if there's enough, we hear enough of the same questions, we'll answer. Maybe we'll do another show, hopefully with James or Corey next time, in addition to me or in lieu of. But yes, I think great time to get educated, great time to buy Bitcoin, and maybe increase your auto DCA, smash buy a little bit, right? But I do think short term it could be a little bearish, but medium term I'm super, super bullish. So that's my takeaway. And I do want people to think about the only downside to this is that there could be an increase in people who don't self-custody owning Bitcoin, and that might hurt Bitcoin, the financial freedom objectives long term. So Bitcoin could be a long-term store of value that's not widely used. I hate to say it, for self-sovereignty, but for the price, it's hugely bullish.
Absolutely, man. I love that. All right, Terrence, I want to ask you about Swan Private, because you mentioned, you're like, look, if anyone has any questions, any doubts or concerns, and that's where I see Swan Private. I see Steven on Bitcoin Twitter. I see Alex, he's holding down Cafe Bitcoin every day from 10 to 12, and yourself, you're regular on that show as well, right? So what is Swan Private for anyone who's listening and who's interested in that?
Sure. And the third person I would mention is John Haar, who is wonderful, ex-Goldman Sachs, deeply thoughtful person, and has some hilarious takes on Twitter, on X as well. So Swan Private is the best way, I think, for you, if you're a little bit wealthier, and you don't have to be that wealthy, it's just not just, but if you can buy $100,000 in Bitcoin, and we do have Bitcoiners who are so bullish on Bitcoin, their entire net worth of $100,000 is in Bitcoin, and they buy through us, and you get concierge, dedicated contact, white glove service. So whether it's Steven, Alex, John, or even myself, I'm more focused on other things these days, but we will give you excellent service, expert access, priority customer service when you deal with support at swan.com. And you also get invited to be part of a wonderful community where you can get to know people like Nico in person in Miami, myself, Corey, Guy, our president, and Jeremy Showalter, our chief product officer, will all be at the Swan Salon, which is the first Thursday of each month in LA, third Thursday of the month, I believe, for Miami. So it's in-person community where you can get to know Swans, but also other Bitcoiners, including clients and just friends of Swan, speakers. Listen to Greg Foss speak, Michael Saylor, and many others, Robert Breedlove, speak in person, ask them questions. Last time a few months ago, I hung out with Jimmy Song and a client for like 30 minutes, just the three of us after the Swan Salon. Was incredible, just being sort of a fly on the wall and listening to and interacting with Jimmy and listening to his great thoughts on Bitcoin and so forth. So it's a wonderful way to build community. And you also get VIP events that are for you only as a client at the Bitcoin conference in Miami this past year, Nashville next year, and at Pacific Bitcoin, where if folks want to contact me, I have a special discount code for you, and I'm sure Nico has that as well. So yeah, please come see us. I think Bitcoin's about community. We also have AMAs and live streams just for Swan Private on occasion. But yeah, the expert access, community, service, and also special products like the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, tax loss harvesting, that's reserved for Swan Private until we can kind of commoditize it, productize it, and put some engineers to work to make it available for all of our customers. But initially, those products are always kind of just rolled out to private clients. So a lot of advantages.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan as well. I'm at the Miami Swan Salon. So if you guys ever want to drop by, but also, if you're not part of Swan Private, Swans are always there to answer all your questions. As we do, we hang out on Bitcoin Twitter. We're education focused, right? We're pushing, we incentivize self-custody. So yeah, guys. So I hope you guys learned something today about the accounting, this breaking news, another win for Saylor. I want to thank Terrence, Managing Director at Swan Private. Thank you so much for joining us on the live stream today. Guys, we're Swan Bitcoin, best place to build your Bitcoin stack. And follow us on Twitter at Swan handle for daily Bitcoin news, videos, quotes, memes, events. Follow us on the Swan Bitcoin YouTube channel. We're dropping original content. We're clipping some of the best Bitcoin content in the industry. We're dropping Swan signals every so often, shorties, everything. So subscribe to the Swan YouTube channel. We love you all, and we'll see you on the next breaking news. And stay tuned. Peace out, y'all.